Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about Trump goes to Kenosha, Dr. Everett Piper joins us, and justice delayed, Michael Flynn versus Emmett Sullivan. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And welcome again to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. Well, there's a big fuss going on about whether or not President Trump should go visit Kenosha, Wisconsin in light of the riots last week and the property destruction. And I want to talk about in the First Five today because I think it's actually an important argument about whether or not he should go there. You may recognize the mayor of Kenosha as well as the governor of Wisconsin, both Democrats, have said, President Trump, he should just stay away. He doesn't need to come here, just stirring things up. And I want to tell you how wrong that is and encourage you to think about this. There are people in Wisconsin, in Kenosha, who voted for President Trump. There are people in Wisconsin who actually want the president to help them through this crisis, the destruction of property around them. So this mayor and this governor are out of line to even suggest that the president of the United States ought to stay away because we got this. These are our peeps. There are supporters of President Trump. In fact, Kenosha County, very close, but in the last election cycle, Kenosha County went for President Trump. That's point number one. Point number two. These people, the mayor and the governor, failed to take charge of the situation in Kenosha, allowed an extraordinary situation to get out of hand, and as often is the case in many issues like this, neither has had the honesty and the integrity, the backbone to make clear to the citizens what really happened in the police interaction between police in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Jacob Blake. We talked about this on my show yesterday, and I'm going to talk about it again today very briefly. This is not some guy who is innocently out, happy-go-lucky, out visiting some friends, tried to get in the car, and was tackled and shot by the police. This is a person, the reason the police were there is because the woman, that is the mother of this man's 3 children, had actually gotten a complaint out to the police, and previously about a sexual assault. She claimed that Jacob Blake had sexually assaulted her. Horrific description, I won't even go there, and that she had a restraining order. He was supposed to stay away. Instead of staying away, he shows up at her place. This is why we need police, because police actually help women, especially when you have a dangerous situation. So Blake shows up, the woman doesn't want him there, she's the one that calls the police, saying the guy I've already complained once sexually assaulted me, who's not honoring the restraining order, is here, and so I want the police to come. That's why they were there. And after being tased twice, Jacob Blake tased twice, and then putting Jacob Blake, the one who was shot, put a police officer in a headlock. Finally, they got to the point as they are worried about him reaching inside a van. They don't know what he's reaching for. Heaven knows what he may have had in there. All sorts of weapons. We don't know. But this is when the police took action. If there was integrity on the part of the mayor and the governor, they might say, we agree that we always want to be reassessing the police. We have to be very careful about police brutality and very careful about racism. But the facts here don't justify anything that happened. And speaking of what happened in Kenosha, I'm going to show you some pictures. I happen to have a good friend who lives in Kenosha and a friend whose sister lives there. And I got these pictures sent to me. Matt the Wonderful. This is what Kenosha looks like right now. Okay, hold on one second. The previous picture, this is the second picture I sent. The big picture before that, this is a car dealership. And you can see this car destroyed and the happy little sold sign still sitting in the windshield, somehow survived. This is a car dealer, every car destroyed. Next one, the sold sign. There's a guy, obviously someone's got the car sold and now it's gone. We can go to the next picture. And this is what Kenosha looks like, a war zone. a war zone. Next picture, yeah, another war zone picture. And I think I have one more or two more. I want you to see, this is an office. I think it was at the car dealership, an office. This is what happened to that city. This is where Trump wants to go visit. And I want to make the final point in this first 5 today about this. Actually, two more. Okay, first of all, look at this. Someone actually wrote they had to board up these businesses because they're being destroyed by rioters. And someone writes, puts Kenosha with a peace sign in the O, and then be kind to each other after the city's been destroyed. Kind of ironic, I don't know, hypocritical, we don't know who wrote that. But the two last points I want to make in this first 5 are this. Number 1, what this mayor and governor are doing is playing along on the Democrat playbook, the Democrat Party line in this election cycle, which is all of the violence in the cities around the country. It's all Trump's fault. It is Trump's fault. You hear Biden making noises like this already. Biden making noises about, well, it's happening under President Trump, and, we didn't have this under President Obama. And I mean, even though we did have some problems under Obama, but the point is there's a political mission. The Democrat media mob, the leaders in Democrat cities and states around this country are on a mission to get on board with messaging to America that all these riots are only happening because President Trump is there. It's all his fault. So the mayor and the governor are comfortable saying, well, he better stay away, kind of implying it's his fault. We're in this situation, so please stay away, as though it's his fault. It is the fault of Democrat policies that for years have resulted, and fault of the agitation we talked about yesterday in great detail, agitation by the Communist Party in America, the Marxist Party in America, to encourage division, hatred, and eventually revolution. I read to you yesterday the comments from the Revolutionary Communist Party leader of this country talking about now's our time, keep up these protests, burn the place down. We're going to have a Marxist revolution right here in America. Last point in today's first 5. If you want to understand to whom we should be pointing the finger of blame, I want you to think about the conduct, the spending by the Ford Foundation. I've always been really upset by the idea of the Ford Foundation. It sounds so nice. It sounds like you're referring to some folksy American company, the Ford car, very Americana. The Ford Foundation, radically leftist organization, funds and supports leftists of all kinds, and leftism and Marxism and socialism. Listen to the litany of organizations they have supported, all now wrapped up in this disaster we're watching in America. Ford Foundation has poured nearly $2 billion, B as in boy, $billion, into active disrupting systems to advance social justice. Words from their website. They have in the billions of dollars a variety of organizations who engage in disrupting systems to advance social justice. Within the Ford Foundation, key members tied directly to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Harris's sister, an ex-campaign chairwoman, Maya Harris, was the Ford Foundation vice president, along now with Biden's senior advisor, Christabel Alex. We have funding for communist-connected street agitators coming right out of Ford Foundation. What you're watching in the streets of America is agitated, manufactured disaster, manufactured and funded disaster, bust-in disaster by these people. Ford Foundation, a variety of organizations. They have paid to support the Communist World Workers Party, the Southern Vision Alliance. Oh, that sounds nice, except it's about destroying America. Southern Vision Alliance. All these organizations paid for the Ford Foundation tied to the left do not buy in to the argument of this mayor and governor that somehow everything happening in Kenosha and around the country should be viewed as the fault of Donald Trump. And if they want to tell someone to stay away, in Kenosha, we talked about yesterday, it was out of 175 activists arrested, rioters arrested, and 102 of them came from out of state. Came from outside Kenosha, some from other places in Wisconsin. These are bust-in rioters. It is those kind of people that the mayor and governor ought to be saying, stay away, get out of here, don't come to our city to burn it, and destroy our property. They're the ones who should be kept out of Kenosha. The President of the United States has every right to be there. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First 5. So I mentioned at the start of the show, we have a guest. He's joined us frequently. Dr. Everett Piper is joining us. Love when he joins us. And I always mention, even though it's only one of his many accomplishments, but he wrote a national bestseller book, Not a Daycare, The Devastating Consequences of Abandoning Truth. He's a former president of the Oklahoma Wesleyan University for 17 years. The Not a Daycare book sprang out of an incident at his university where he was explaining to these students, you didn't come to college to get coddled. You came to learn, to engage in the discussion of ideas, to have the robust debate of ideas, all the things part of Western civilization. That's what prompted the book. He's now a Washington Times columnist, frequent guest on many news shows. And I'm so glad he could join us today. Hello, Dr. Piper.
Thank you, Debbie. By the way, I have a sequel to Not a Daycare coming out, published by Regnery. It'll be out soon, and it's titled Grow Up, and life isn't safe, but it's good. So I'm basically following up on the daycare story with some prescriptions on how to live as an adult in an infantilized world of juvenile pouting and cries for safety.
I love that. In fact, I was trying to write down you're speaking Grow Up, which is it's a good title, Grow Up. And then Life Isn't Safe, but It Is Good. That's a great title. Okay. Well, actually,
anyway.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. You also have a podcast ongoing, so now you're busy doing your own show, too. You want to tell us a little bit about that before I dive into your two columns I want to talk about?
Well, thank you for allowing me to just say, yeah, I have my a daily radio show that broadcasts here in southern Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's called The Rebellion. And in times of universal deceit, truth is the only rebellion left. And that is also featured as a podcast on the Washington Times website.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I saw the list of podcasts there at the Washington Times website. So I have to tell you, I mentioned before we came on air that one of the columns that you wrote, I read the title, I thought, doggone it, I'm going to have to disagree with Dr. Piper on my show. But one of the columns that you wrote was called, Republicans Know That America is Real, while Democrats see it as a subjective idea. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about that and to talk about that title is, I've often made the argument, and I do love making this point about America. I know you actually agree with it, but the idea that I could move to Italy and do whatever is required to become an Italian citizen and learn the language and learn the laws and pass the citizenship test and become a citizen, but I couldn't become Italian because I am not by ethnicity Italian. And what I love about America is, my use of the term is an idea because it's not rooted to a race, ethnicity, or national origin. The identity of America is rooted around the ideas of the founding of America, which you go through in your column. But when I saw that headline, I thought, well, we're going to have to disagree with him. But your point is really well taken. I'd love to have you just start. You took that language about Democrats seeing America as a subjective idea out of the Democrat platform. I'd love to have you just tell us your thinking about going after that provision in their platform.
Well, the very first phrase in their preamble in the Democrat platform is America is an idea. And then they go in and describe what they view in a postmodern Enlightenment way, an arrogant oligarchical way, what America is. All of these abstract concepts. Well, Aristotle and Edmund Burke and Eric Voegelin, all of these conservative thinkers over the course of the millennia have argued that if you want to have a free republic, it has to be grounded in real human experience, the reality of who we are as human beings, the reality of how we live together. We can't ignore tradition and reason. We can't ignore the facts of our existence. We can't construct a republic based on feelings. Like Ben Shapiro says, the facts don't care about your feelings. My argument in this article is Democrats believe in feelings, abstract ideas. They don't ground it in a real constitution, a real declaration, a real nation with real borders and real citizens and real laws and a real existence as human beings. Republicans, conservatives, believe in the objective reality of all these things, a constitution, a country, a nation, of borders and laws. And therefore, when we address the issues like are going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin, we're dealing with it in the context of a real nation, real country with real laws, and we want to correct the problem because we have reality on our side, whereas Democrats just sit back and they fantasize about what they want it to be, and they ignore the human existence, and they ignore who we are as a nation.
I love that point. It's very, very well taken. And, the other thing that is accomplished if you're on the American left, the Democrat side, and you use an idea like that, is that you're not tethered to any principles. You're not tethered to any principle because it's an idea. And so today we wake up, you use the expression emotion. That's exactly right. It's an emotional reaction. Well, today this happened, so the answer has to be this, without tethering to a principle, a sense of ordered liberty, a sense of government. And it really is, in many ways, how the Democrat Party operates. It kind of jumps from crisis to crisis with a emotional reaction and then a solution that they come up with, never ever tethered to all the protections that we have in the founding documents, such as, for example, rule of law, limited government. It's an amazing, they give themselves kind of permission to go wild by calling it an idea that's just untethered.
And Edmund Burke, in his classic work Reflections on the French Revolution, said that he could see the violence of the Jacobins coming. He could see the blood flowing in the streets and the guillotine because they discarded all the traditions that France as a nation was built upon. They tore it down. They burned the church, they burned the government, they burned the king, they tore it all down. They constructed this new ideology that wasn't tethered to anything but their feelings, their socialist feelings. And Burke said it was inevitable. It was inevitable that everything would collapse and people would lose their heads because you never bow the knee to the rage mob. Never. You never bow the knee to the rage mob, because when you bow, you expose your neck and they're going to have their head. They're going to have your head. You have to ground yourself in the objective facts of God's existence, natural law, common sense, a constitution with a real government, a real nation, and real laws. Otherwise, anarchy prevails. That's what we're dealing with in our culture right now.
We are. And some people who aren't as aware of the ideas that you're sharing, haven't studied them or thought about them, what you get caught up in is the immediacy of the moment, and then a solution that at that very moment sounds pretty good. Well, yeah, that sounds like a better idea. And the extreme one, of course, right now is defunding the police, because you've been worked into a lather over some genuine problems with police brutality and perhaps racist conduct, and many concocted, exaggerated instances that the solution, let's just not have police anymore. You can feel like, oh, the Democrats are solving the problem because we've had a bad incident. They're solving it, and Republicans aren't doing that because they're holding on to law. But I say this so often, and much of my public speaking, I don't think the vast majority of people who are thinking that the ideas coming out of the Democrat Party are appealing and would vote for them, I don't think they really want the country, the culture, and the society that you would create if you actually followed the way they govern. You agree with that?
It's almost like, okay, that John Lennon's famous song, which I despise in terms of its symbolism and its lyrics, and imagine. Yeah. Well, take that song and just apply it to some of the, imagine there's no police. Well, it's easy if you try. Just look at Kenosha. I mean, look at Portland. Imagine there's no police. It's easy if you try. Well, of course it is. You've got chaos. Again, the United States has a real Army, a real Navy, a real Coast Guard, a real Marines. It has a real Air Force for a reason. It's because we have real enemies who want to destroy us. Reality. Conservatives are grounded in conserving reality. Progressives ignore reality. They construct a new world. They imagine a new world that's based only on their feelings. And history tells us, real history tells us, not contrived postmodern deconstruction of history, real history tells us that when you don't attend to the facts, like C.S. Lewis said, a measuring rod, outside of those things being measured, a real God with a real natural law, because it's endowed to us by our Creator, then blood flows in the streets. And that's what we're dealing with when we address these stories, these news stories that you've highlighted today.
We are dealing with that. It's so deeply troubling. One of the points you make in this article you're contrasting ideas that are nebulous and untethered to, and you use the word real quite frequently, the idea of a real nation, real citizens, and real borders. It is I was really struck by that, thinking of how, when you have the concept of a sovereign nation, you can only be sovereign if you have borders that everyone agrees on the planet that this border surrounds this country and they get to make their rules, and this border surrounds this country and they make their rules. So it's real countries, real borders, real citizens, and then a real concept of citizenship. And when you are not supportive of, when we want to overthrow or fundamentally transform the nation that America is from its founding, it is a great tactic they have come up with, an effective tactic of just trying to introduce the subtle suggestion to American society. Well, borders don't really matter. Isn't it kind of arbitrary? These people coming across the southern border, they're just as nice as we are. And that you gradually work it away at the construct of a sovereign nation if you can't agree real borders and a real concept of citizenship. It is actually a brilliant strategy if you want to destroy America.
I would recommend that everybody go get a book that was published about 10, 12 years ago, if my memory is right. It's 10 Books Every Conservative Should Read by Benjamin Wiker, W-I-K-E-R. 10 books every conservative should read. He highlights the argument that you and I are making right now. He highlights Aristotle and Vogelin and C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton and Edmund Burke. All of them are making the very simple argument. Human existence is grounded in reality. It's not grounded in make-believe, fantasy. And if we ignore reality, we're going to have blood flowing in the streets. It always happens. It always happens. It happened in the French Revolution. It happened in the Bolshevik Revolution. It happened in the Cultural Revolution in Red China. It always happens. Hundreds of millions of people die when we ignore reality and we start living on fantasy. That's the difference between the two parties right now, in my view.
I love that, and I'm taking notes in the books you're suggesting. I already have a pile, by the side of the bed, growing, and I wish I could eliminate the need for sleep, because I would much rather read more than sleep. But your second column I want to talk about today, again, I love your writing in the Washington Times. This one, I'd not even heard this story, but your caption of your article, and again, for everyone listening, you can find this on our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop-down list of links. The article is captioned, Paying for the Indoctrination of Hate in Our Children. And I know a lot of people say, oh, come on, they're not really indoctrinating hate. But I want to tell our listeners, and then let you talk about it. There's a professor, astonishingly, a professor of philosophy of religion. So, should be somewhat familiar with religion, named Timothy Snedeker. And in July of this year, he's a professor at University of California, Santa Barbara. And in July of this year, he responded to a survey question posted on Twitter that asked this question: if you dropped 2,000 years back in time with nothing but the knowledge you have now, what would you do? And this university professor, Timothy Snedeker, answered that, easy. I would find and assassinate Jesus of Nazareth. This is a professor of religion, philosophy of religion at UC Santa Barbara, and if he could do anything, he'd go back and assassinate Jesus. First of all, I hope he got fired, but I doubt it. But I want to just ask you, how do we even get to the place where someone who thinks like that could be teaching at a college level about philosophy of religion?
Well, this is not unusual. The people listening to the show right now, and I know we've got very limited time to discuss this, but here, if you want to take home on this story, here's my argument. And I think I know what I'm talking about. I spent my entire career leading the ivory tower. Okay, so I know the inside of the beast. I know what goes on inside. This man is not unusual. Yes, he said it in a very aggressive way, but his hatred for Christianity was just expressed very boldly and very crassly in a response to a Twitter. The reality of the American Academy, the reality of secular universities, and unfortunately even some that claim to be Christian, is they embrace this deconstruction of the church, of Christianity. They hate Jesus Christ. And again, Debbie, let's go back to Edmund Burke and his warnings about the French Revolution. What did the revolution, what's one of the take-homes of Diderot in the French Revolution? We will not be satisfied until we strangle the last king by the entrails of the last priest. Their goal was to kill the government by killing the church. Kill the church. Strangle the last king by the entrails of the last priest. And this man from the from the University of California, Santa Barbara, is basically saying, I want to kill Christianity. It has caused more harm, in my view, than any other worldview in the history of mankind. So if I could do anything, if I could get in a time machine and go back 2,000 years, my first thing I would do is kill Jesus. Well, what he doesn't realize is that there were a lot of people back there that wanted to kill Jesus too, but he proved that he's the Son of God and he rises again. So go ahead and kill him if you wish. He will rise again, and he will judge up all mankind at the end of days. Christianity wins at the end of time. This man doesn't understand that.
He does not. And you think of all the things you could have said and said. I'm going to go try to find that Twitter feed and see what other people said. But, as to the argument about Edmund Burke and all that, there were people who said, well, part of the problem in France and other places with the religion and church were so intertwined, and part of people's resentment of the government, religion and government were so intertwined, and part of the resentment may have been because church is all mixed up with government. But you come forward today in America where we have we have a government founded on the ideas that we established in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, rooted in Judeo-Christian values, but the church is not government, and the government is not church. But still, this disdain, this just hysterical anger of leftists continues against the church, even in modern America. Here he is. No, the church isn't hurting anybody, or church isn't in a position to force anyone to do anything. It's not in a position to take your life away, take your freedom away. It's a separate, it's not a governmental entity. But still, the hatred for faith is vivid in this guy. And I'll tell you one thought I have about that, and I want to hear why you think why it would still be so vivid today. But the reason, when you're a leftist and you want to have leftist control over society, leftist government controlling everything, and you have a population that actually turns to a higher power for its sense of its beliefs about the nature of life, reality, of truth, of morality, these people, truly religious people, true believers, are not controllable. And when you're a leftist and you want our society to be government controlled, these Christians get in the way. That's what I think causes much of the disdain for religion among leftists in America. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Why he's so mad today?
Well, okay. I know I'm focusing a lot on the French Revolution, but I think
it's great.
What's the difference between the French Revolution and the American Revolution? The French Revolution sought to kill God and elevate man. The American Revolution listened to Edmund Burke and others and realized that if you kill God, you're going to have chaos. You're going to have violence. So if you want a virtuous republic, what did John Adams say? Our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people, and it's wholly inadequate to the government of any other.
Yep.
That's the foundation of the American Revolution, that we need a moral and religious people, and that this Constitution will be wholly inadequate to govern any other. So we have to build our nation in the reality, again, back to my article, the reality of a real God with real laws and real morality, and we're going to ground our real republic in our real Constitution and our real Declaration of Independence in those facts. We're not going to make the mistakes that the French are going to make because they're going the opposite direction. Thankfully, our founding fathers, Jefferson and Franklin and Adams and Washington, understood the difference between grounding your nation in the moral and religious facts of the Christian faith as opposed to what the French were doing.
Absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true. It's just and it has something that's been lost actually in our education system really for the last, I don't even know what it is, 2 or 3 or 4 decades, where young people are not taught about where the ideas of our founding came from, that our founders actually were a moral and religious people who turned to the scriptures for guidance. And that's what helped them create the documents we have, the country we have. And that has actually been lost and needs to be retaught. I also love that in your article, I want to just commend all the different times in your article that you made reference to different teachings of Jesus. The idea, why would someone in modern America want to go after and criticize Jesus and all these beautiful teachings that that many Christians read and study regularly. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers. I mean, they're just, the script, the Gospels are just full of these beautiful teachings. And the idea that that's what he would go destroy, it's just pure evil.
Yeah, he obviously, and this is the key, he's a professor of religion at a university that you all might be sending your kids to, and he believes the Beatitudes. He believes the beauty of the Beatitudes, the selflessness of the Beatitudes, the humility of the Beatitudes, of Jesus' core teachings in the gospel needs to be destroyed. Well, what's he going to replace it with? Power, human power, and human arrogance, and that's frightening.
Amen to that. Yep, that is exactly right. Well, Dr. Piper, I love every chance we get to talk. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate that. And again, one quick time for our listeners, how they find you online.
You can just go to Dr. Everett Piper, that's DrEverettPiper.com. That's my website.
Okay, and I encourage people to read your columns in Washington Times. And again, thank you so much for joining me today.
All right. Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, folks, that's really a gift, a tremendous American, great writer, great thinker, and just honestly, he's provided so much wisdom to students over 17 years at Oklahoma Wesleyan. He's now writing and speaking and putting his own podcasts out. So he's just a gift to have every time he comes on the show. Last story today I want to turn to very quickly, and I called this Justice Delayed, Michael Flynn versus Emmett Sullivan. And the quick legal point to make is, if you don't remember where this is, and probably many of you do, but very quickly, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn I hope he's changed by now, was a Democrat, and he served under President Obama, and he then was going to serve when President Trump won. Michael Flynn, was going to move over to the White House and serve President Trump as National Security Advisor. But Michael Flynn had angered the leftist Obama administration. He had publicly disagreed with them about the Iran deal, which everyone informed, many military leaders called out the Iran deal during the time of the negotiation. Every time information came out saying, this is a really bad deal. We're not getting a good deal here. This is bad. But this was someone that President Obama took real offense at. So Flynn comes in, and long story short, we've been over it many times, but as the operation, as the overthrow of the government effort, as the coup against President Trump, which really began as an operation against him during the election cycle, and continued inside the FBI, inside the Department of Justice, the effort to destroy this man, first candidate Trump, and then President Trump. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was one of the people that they chose as a target. And Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, early on in the Trump administration, had an interaction with the FBI where they were asking him questions about a conversation he had had with a Russian ambassador. And what the conversation with, and all it involved very quickly, was they're asking him questions about his conversation with the Russian ambassador. The FBI people go back to the FBI and report, essentially, we think he was telling the truth. He didn't do anything wrong. Seemed fine to us. They're ready to drop it because all of the suspicions that had actually been cooked up inside the FBI and the DOJ, this concoction of the Trump-Russia collusion, which never occurred, but we all on this show call it the Russia collusion hoax, had never occurred, but they were working very hard to make something out of nothing as a means to continue going after President Trump. One person they thought they could potentially use to try to turn against President Trump, get information about him, was Flynn. Didn't work out. Anyway, long story short, they ended up accusing Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, accusing him, and then later indicting him under the Mueller investigation, indicting him for this is what I've used the expression, process crimes, the kind of perjury trap set up, the argument that they had been listening. He didn't even know, Flynn didn't know when he's being questioned, that his conversation with Kislyak had been recorded. And so he's just answering, and the people questioning him, have the transcript in front of them or have it to refer to later. Point of the whole thing was they set him up, perjury trap, indict him, and off they go to the races. This is someone they hope Flynn will be ultimately flip and turn on Trump. So Flynn has been through the ringer almost beyond description. He has been indicted, he's been prosecuted, And he ended up, because of the way the FBI treated his family, threats against his son, he's lost everything, lost his home, couldn't keep up his mortgage. I mean, lost everything defending himself, and now they're threatening his son. So, and this is a tactics that these are not new to this current FBI and Department of Justice. These are tactics used in third world dictatorships. They're tactics used by communist, Marxist, evil governments that simply go to attack the predecessor in the administration or attack their political enemies. These are evil tactics. It wasn't the first time, but they don't belong in America. That's what they did to him. He pleads guilty, and he's about to be sentenced. And fortunately for all of us, he retained the attorney who's been on the show many times, a friend of mine, Sidney Powell. They retained Sidney Powell. Flynn retained Sidney Powell. New filings are made. And the long and short of it was Sidney Powell. And by the time the sentencing is coming close, most of America who's paying attention has become aware that actually Flynn was set up, and not only was he set up, but the entire Russia collusion story was a farce, was made up by people inside the DOJ and the FBI with the effort to bring down candidate Trump and then President Trump. Astonishing level of treachery engaged in by numerous people inside those agencies, our national law enforcement agencies. Treachery designed to set up people to do the perjury trap thing, to get them to the point they end up just saying, okay, what do I have to do? They will do anything to cooperate because they've been set up by this. It is the most despicable, un-American conduct by these people. So Flynn retains Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell begins, because we've all started to know these things now, and Sidney Powell, former prosecutor, very, very aware with the Department of Justice, very aware of what procedures are supposed to follow, what should have been done, what wasn't done. She begins filing motions, and she's a very, very tough attorney, very smart, very committed to the actual rule of law. She's filing motions, and she's demanding discovery. She's trying to get at, what happened inside and expose what happened inside the FBI and the DOJ. And her motions are bringing things forward. New arguments are being made. The case is being heard in the federal district court in Washington, D.C. under Judge Emmett Sullivan. So Emmett Sullivan, as a small aside, already knows Sidney Powell fairly well because Sidney Powell, was in front of him numerous times when she was in the DOJ and when she was involved in the prosecutions of Enron officials. And she wrote the book, Sidney Powell wrote her book, License to Lie, talking about the unbelievable corruption, but the corruption and the nefarious conduct of lawyers inside the FBI and the DOJ when they decide to go after someone, the way they set up people, they ended up making crimes, prosecuting for people for conduct that doesn't even constitute a crime. Her book is brilliant. So she's in front of Sullivan. Sullivan more or less went along with the rule of law in that case. So Sidney Powell filing his motions, thinking we're going to get justice. And as she begins exposing more and more of what really happens inside the FBI and DOJ, the Department of Justice announces they're withdrawing all charges against Flynn. They announce dropping all charges, and the prosecutors, the Department of Justice is the prosecutor, they move to dismiss all charges against Flynn. Now, let me make clear what happens. I'm a lawyer by background. I can tell you this is the way it is. You have, for very important reasons in our Constitution, separation of powers. You have an executive branch, and that includes the president, the law enforcement agencies, the Department of Justice. You have the judicial branch. They are not there to prosecute laws. The executive branch does the prosecution. The judicial branch is the one that hears cases. They apply the law. They don't make the law. Emmett Sullivan's job when the DOJ moved to dismiss was to say, case dismissed. Okay, the prosecutor, the only entity in this entire litigation that has the right to bring charges, that did bring charges against Flynn, has now said we're dropping charges, and therefore the only answer there was for him legally, for Emmett Sullivan, was to drop all the charges. And he won't do it. Emmett Sullivan, Democrat appointed judge, federal district court judge, is so determined to keep Michael Flynn under the thumb of the DOJ, under the thumb of the media, under the thumb of the prosecutors, that even though the prosecutors have said, based on everything they discovered and things that came out. And once, by the way, these things came out in response to Sidney Powell's motions and in response to Attorney General Barr appointing a special attorney, U.S. attorney, just to look into all the documents that the DOJ held onto and didn't turn over when they were supposed to. So, in these kind of cases, in criminal cases, there is an absolute standard. The Brady rule says if you're the prosecutor and you're going after somebody and the lawyer for the person you're accusing says, I want to see this document, or even if they don't ask, the prosecutor has a duty under law, under the Brady rule, to turn over all information to the person being accused, to their lawyer, to the defendant, that is possibly exculpatory, could help, meaning proving their innocence, or proving that they weren't guilty of all charges, or in any way impacting the possible sentencing of that person. There is a very high absolute duty, Brady rule, you gotta turn it over. And what Sidney Powell was fully aware of, and why she went after the DOJ and continued motions demanding that things be turned over. Finally, Attorney General Barr gets a U.S. attorney involved to look at all the documents the DOJ withheld, and that attorney says, whoa, you could not, DOJ attorneys, you cannot withhold this information, these documents from Flynn, from the accused. So the documents get turned over, and we went over them in great detail at the time, but the gist of them made very clear that the entire effort to prosecute and get Michael Flynn was concocted and was unjustified by the law, was essentially part of the witch hunt. The documents made clear by the notes made by the people involved in the decisions with respect to Michael Flynn being prosecuted make very clear they were just setting him up. They're finding some way to get him, and they found a way. And the notes make clear they're cooking the books. They're cooking up the terms of this prosecution, cooking up the charges. They're setting him up. They know that he didn't do anything wrong. They know he didn't, but they want to get him because they ultimately want to get him to maybe turn on President Trump. Once these documents become clear, then the DOJ says, okay, uncle. They file the motion, drop all charges, and Emmett Sullivan has no other choice under law, no other choice than to dismiss these charges. That he doesn't have the role of prosecutor to be saying, well, maybe prosecutors, you should have charged this crime, and maybe we can find some other crime. Maybe can we go investigate further, find some other crime? The judge, Emmett Sullivan, has a job to dismiss the case because the only party with the role to accuse anybody, including Michael Flynn, is the prosecutor. And Sullivan won't dismiss the charges. Sullivan wants to hold a hearing. He wants to continue discussing whether or not, why did Michael Flynn plead guilty if he really wasn't guilty, which everyone who's ever studied criminal law understands exactly why people sometimes plead guilty when they're not guilty, because they can't stand the pressure any longer coming from corrupt practices by prosecutors. That is the reason many people do that. So, back to the situation that Sullivan will just simply not dismiss charges. So Sidney Powell leaps into action, files a writ of mandamus, which is just it's a legal document going from the district court where the case is being heard. She files a writ of mandamus in the appellate court, the next court up. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals says, come on, you've got to dismiss this. Emmett Sullivan has no right to not do it. And let me make clear something, people. What Emmett Sullivan is doing is pretty much unprecedented. This is not like a routine thing once the prosecutors drop all charges for the judge to try to hold on to the case, dig into the background of the defendant, find something else he might be able to accuse him of. This is unheard of. Unheard of. So, Sidney files a writ of mandamus. She gets a three-judge panel out of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and they actually follow the law and say, yeah, actually, Judge Sullivan, you got to dismiss these charges. I mean, you've got nowhere to go. You have no right to do this. And instead of accepting that, Emmett Sullivan, who's, by the way, hired his own attorney, the federal district court judge hired his own attorney to defend him in his effort to continue to try to persecute Flynn. So then that attorney for the judge appeals the full circuit court, D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and they just ruled, actually, it was a procedural ruling, but they ruled that the writ of mandamus was premature. Essentially, they're saying, let Sullivan get to the point of holding the hearing, at which time he's supposed to dismiss these charges. And then if he refuses to dismiss them, then you can come back with your writ of mandamus. And you might say in some kind of perfect utopian, sterile, legal construct world, well, that's not so bad because, they're just trying to say, let's just follow the process. It is evil and it is bad because the point of this ruling is to drag out this case as long as they can, drag it out as long as they can, keep Michael Flynn under their thumb, keep him under their reps. And so now the case is back before Sullivan, who's going to decide what he's going to do with it. And I'll tell you, this example I was mentioning earlier, this is like when you're in the World Series and you're in the bottom of the ninth and you're the batter and you have 3 men on base and you hit a grand slam home run and it goes out of the park and every single runner runs around the bases and everyone touches all the bases they had to touch at the end and you win. But at the end of the game, the umpire says, you know what? I'm not sure we're going to give you all those runs. I mean, that's 4 runs. I don't think so. We're going to talk about it and we're going to, think it through. And you, the batter, you, the teams, you can't do that. You can't. The rules are the rules. I hit a grand slam and we got 4 runs and we all touched the bases and we all came home. Rules are the rules. And the umpire saying, well, we're going to talk about some more. And then you appeal it to the umpire association and they say, well, let the umpires talk about it a little bit more. It's that level of absurdity. There's no basis for what Sullivan is doing. And it is very much an indication, very much a window on the reality that there is a giant cabal in this country still determined to bring down President Trump. And the most troubling of all, and I'll close out with this and turn to the end of my show today, most troubling of all, it is a signal about how very dangerous America is becoming because left-wingers in this country do not believe they have to follow the rule of law. They do not think it applies to them. They did not when they were inside the DOJ and the FBI going after innocent people, cooking up charges, concocting charges, making things up, lying on forms. They thought this was the right thing to do because they don't like Trump and they know better than the voters. But when you have people in the national law enforcement agencies taking that position, what they're really saying is rule of law doesn't matter, what we think matters. This is what Sullivan is saying. Rule of law doesn't matter. What I think matters. I don't think the DOJ should drop these charges, so I'm going to drag this out as long as I can. And people, if we lose the rule of law in this country, we are truly, truly down a very dangerous path. We'll talk more about this as the case is ongoing. I'm going to tell you now at the end of every show, I tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. And we started the show today with our very first topic. I think Matt the Wonderful has these up, or will have them up. Trump to Kenosha. Okay, why it matters to you. The political disconnect. Many citizens of Kenosha will welcome Trump's visit in 2020. The Democrat governor of Wisconsin and the Kenosha mayor are leftists discouraging Trump's visit. The new leftist spin, rioting is Trump's fault. He's stirring things up. Biden will calm things. These are lies extraordinaire. But these facts put the lie to the leftist spin. 102 out of 175 arrested in Kenosha protesters were not residents of Kenosha. Rioting is bought and paid for, not authentic, not evidence of uniform discontent. The gentleman who was shot by police after resisting arrest violently fought officers, had sexual assault warrant and a restraining order against him. Biden finally made his first announcement of riots yesterday, only because polling tells him the American people are not liking what's happening. Democrats own this violence and rioting. All of it's in Democrat-run cities. Democrat DAs are freeing criminals and excusing them. I didn't even get that story. DAs throughout the country got to office because they're funded by George Soros. Actually, in one of them in California, in Costa County, California, said to prosecutors that they shouldn't prosecute looters who broke into stores and stole things if the looters convinced them they actually kind of needed the things that they stole. Actually said that was the standard. Okay, and so you have a Trump landslide is building. Democrats humoring of anarchy is insane. And then we had justice delayed and Michael Flynn. Court of Appeals ruling, arguably only procedural, saying is premature. Give Sullivan one more chance to do the right thing, but there's very little reason to think he will. The DOJ said there is more undisclosed evidence proving Flynn's innocence and the FBI's culpability. Everyone knows this is a political hit job on Flynn for disagreeing with Obama and signing up to work with Trump. There is no precedent in 200 years of American law justifying Sullivan's behavior. Judges are not supposed to be prosecutors or protesters. The rule of law is on life support in America. Barr is running out of time to repair it. 60+ million Trump supporters will have no reason to trust the DOJ or the FBI ever again. If they get away with framing a 3-star general, what will they do to you? And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you so much for tuning in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.